Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call the select board meeting of Tuesday, December 10th to order. And the first item of business is approval of the agenda.
So
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any recommended requested changes? No amendments to the agenda. All in favor of approving the agenda as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Next is approval of the minutes of our November 19th select board meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any amendments to the meeting? Minutes of the last meeting?
Impressive recollection of a very robust meeting.
Busy. Thank God for videotape. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'll abstain.
And an abstention. Citizen comments. Is there anyone here for something that's not on the agenda? Hearing none. So next is discussion of the Planning Commission's review and public comments on Encore Renewable Energy's proposed 5 megawatt solar project off of South Street Extension. And that's in collaboration with Middlebury College and Green Mountain Power. Are there some significant changes that Encore would like to show us? Any major changes that you'd like to show? There you are. Let's look at this.
Not particularly. I think there's been a plethora of information shared here, and I'd be glad to summarize where we've come from. And I know the college has some brief remarks they could make, but beyond that, I think you've got access to all the information that is relevant.
Why don't you go ahead and come forward and summarize anything that, are there some changes like in screening, and I think you've relocated the field just a little bit, or the placement on the fields, things like that. If you could just highlight those, I think it would be
Sure.
appropriate for everybody to see it together.
That sounds good. And then maybe before that, does it make sense for the college to summarize any of the origin or driver's benefits of the project? Or
You guys got that at the last meeting.
Okay.
I think I'd like to save the time for citizen comments.
That sounds good. So I'll be brief, because again, a lot of this has been reviewed. So again, Derek Moretz, Encore Renewable Energy. We've been working with the college for quite some time, along with Green Mountain Power and some other stakeholders, and just out of the gate, just really expressing gratitude for the select board, where we met several weeks ago, the Planning Commission, where we've met a couple times now, and various stakeholders from across the community. We've had meetings at kitchen tables, we've had meetings at bars, we've had meetings all around to really understand and appreciate both the supporters of this project and also the neighbors and other folks who may rather find a better place or another place for it. So again, March 2019, the college was at the Planning Commission proposing solar on South Street. August 2nd, we issued the 45-day notice for the original site, which was referred to as the Upland. September, we revised to the lowland site. We were at the Planning Commission, who originally had endorsed the support of the project, came back to the select board to present. Then November 21st, we discussed some siting selection criteria and alternative assessments at the Planning Commission, and then back on December 5th, where they issued their endorsement of the project conditional upon certain items. We have been working with the college to look across multiple sites across the community and beyond. It's clear that rooftops, brownfields, and these fragmented sites do not achieve the scale to reach the college's energy goals. So we are committed to advancing this site. We are very interested in feedback from the community and from the select board tonight, and we do look to file for a certificate of public good at the PUC later this year or early next, and there is some opportunity to enhance our screening plan and alter the design slightly. We're set back off of South Street, 800 to 1,000 feet, which is a mitigating factor, as well as a fairly enhanced, robust screening plan that we plan to build upon. So I think what Kathleen is scrolling across here is the latest set of renderings. We also have a large format set of prints on the conference table next door. And again, this was the original screening plan that we are open to enhancing. There's some economic development, which I will not drive home too hard, but tax revenue is significant, starting roughly $40,000 per year in year one, escalating towards $60,000 over the life of the project, yielding roughly $1.3 million to the town through property taxes. That does not include the state education fund taxes that matriculates back to the local classrooms. So I think in the context of the alternative siting analysis, it's important to consider the alternative means of sourcing energy and the status quo where we're getting energy from today. There were some interesting articles of late relative to Hydro-Quebec and one of the primary sources of power for Vermont and the impacts of those projects in their local neighborhoods and communities. So I would encourage the town to really consider implementation of the town plan that really does support locally generated renewable energy in a responsible way that complements the town character, and that's right from the town plan. And we believe this project does that. We're committed to continued collaboration, communication with the stakeholders, and look forward to advancing at the PUC with the input we get here tonight. So I think that's it for now. I'll be around to answer questions as well as the college, and we've brought in our land planner and landscape architect, Mike Boucher from TJ Boyle, who's also available to answer questions that come up. So again, thanks so much for having us, and what we see is a very thoughtful and pragmatic evaluation of this project so far.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Is there anybody who has a question on the board for him before we yield to the citizens that are here?
Just one, sort of on a technical side, Derek. So on a day like today, how much is the 5 megawatt for your general?
Oh, I wasn't in Middlebury today, but I was in Montpelier, and it was not productive. We look at these projects on an annual basis. Clearly, we have short winter days around the solstice and long days in the summertime. On a 5 megawatt peak project, a day like today, we might reach a megawatt or so. But again, the technology we're deploying here is not only the single axis trackers, but also a bifacial technology. So even during the shoulder seasons, we're tracking the sun, and even with snow on the ground, we're collecting power from the underside of the module, so there's an albedo effect. So it's state-of-the-art technology, but again, that's where the battery storage component would allow for charging from the grid when power is cheaper to offload it during times of higher demand.
The batteries don't have a long duration. The current technology.
Yeah, so it's roughly a 3 or 4 hour duration. So if you look at the volatility or fluctuations of pricing of power throughout the day, it really becomes an hourly pattern. So again, it can take power from the grid when power is cheaper during peak production and offload it during peak demand. So that's not only related to the solar, but provides a more resilient grid to the community and to the circuit.
So to the point where you did 5 megawatts for 4 hours.
That's right.
I appreciate the documentation that showed all the alternatives and the reasons, for why those alternatives may not have been as ideal as your first choice. I think that people do accept that we see a large array's value, and they're still weighing, if we've got the right site location of those options. So I'm going to be listening more to your reasons again for why, number one, that that location, even with what you've presented as better setback, I think you mentioned here. I'm thinking of the 125 corridor one in particular, because if we're accepting that we should live with the view of this large array, why wouldn't we go there when there's no technical obstacle to being over there? So I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate that. So just to summarize, the three sites that have really risen to the surface in that alternative analysis are A, the industrial site, which I believe we've really drilled down on the fragmentation of 85 acres to achieve roughly an equivalent scale or output in what could be considered otherwise more valuable for economic development of the community. The second is the Upland Site, which is kind of where we started. In peeling back the onion there, it was topography, making for a very inefficient design. It was geotechnical considerations. It was viewshed, which really cast a broader regional impact, and it was also correlated to it being a higher sensitivity cultural resource or sensitivity for archaeological resources, which is hand in hand with regional viewshed. Moving to the Route 125 site, even beyond what was shared in the packet, upon drilling down on that site, it's evident that there is a large Class 2 wetland that occupies the bulk of the site. So the Planning Commission drilled down on that site, and we had a real-time walkthrough of the aerial imagery and the Class 2 wetland on that site that really cut the capacity of that site from what we originally thought was closer to a 5 megawatt potential back to 1.5 or 2 acres. So again, just not achieving the scale, and then ultimately that would displace, the need for that project would need to be found elsewhere. So I can walk through that if time allows.
Okay.
What about, the college has a lot of property devoted to parking lots. What about that property?
And so even before Encore came to the table, the college had done an inventory of all their rooftops and parking lots, and it was very clear that they were not able to achieve the scale, but part of that was just the economics. So Encore's done the largest parking canopy in the state, and we own that project on the waterfront in Burlington, and I can tell you it's one of the most expensive projects in the state on a per unit basis. It's just a lot of steel, a lot of fixed costs to overcome. Again, I think I mentioned in the last meeting that the college has tapped out its ability to net meter to achieve the higher rates, which the PUC and GMP has been clear that's shifting the cost and the burden to other ratepayers. And so to achieve any cost point that avoids that cost shift, it's just not going to be found in parking canopies of that scale.
Of course, one way that college could do something dramatic would be to forbid student cars. It was something actually that, I spent my life at college. That was proposed by the faculty years ago, and it seems to me that that would be quite a stunning step. And in as much as the college is doing this for its reputation as an environmentally committed institution, which I commend, it seems to me that that would be a possibility worth exploring.
I'm not here to speak for the college, but I can share
No,
that
no, I
as
realize
part
I'm
of
asking
their
you
Energy
to make that
2028 plans, they are committed to reducing their footprint, so
Right,
their
right.
energy
No,
efficiency
I
by
understand
25%.
I understand that. And I'm simply saying that they might go more boldly into that other place. I don't see any sign of that boldness. That's all.
Just one quick other point. Could this become bigger one day?
That's not in the scope of this project, and we have no plans to expand it. But if, I would say that this process that we've been through and the Select Board, Planning Commission has been through has been enlightening for me and hopefully for everyone, because I think there will be a lot more solar projects being proposed around the town and the county as we look to achieve some of our state energy goals, but this is the extent of the proposed solar project on South Street.
Somebody suggested or recommended that if you put some visual flags or kiosk or something so passersby can see what it looks like, you may have already done it. This packet was huge, I couldn't get to the whole package, so have you done anything about that yet to ease people's concerns?
Yeah, so that was recommended by a neighbor, and we did put some stakes in the corners of the proposed array, roughly at the height of the racks, with flagging, just to show approximate corners. That was on the original expanded footprint, which has now shrunken since we were here a few weeks ago. We have committed to expanding that and doing more intermediate stakes. So we will be doing that. I think the renderings and the information that's been presented before you is frankly more effective in visualizing the project, but we will be doing that and we're committed. As far as the kiosk, we've committed to placing a kiosk with a reference to our website that will have a specific, a lot of these same materials you're looking at here, so they can seek more information about the college, or excuse me, the project, but also the college's goals.
Okay, so the question was, they suggested you put more flags, is what I'm asking. Have you done it or are you going to do that? And after you do that, if people have an objection with the way it looks like, that we have a plan after that.
So again, we've put the perimeter, the corner flags. We will be doing intermediate flags around the entire perimeter, and we will be putting a kiosk at the street to have a website reference to the project profile on the website.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Why don't I take comments from the crowd, and maybe we might bring you back up after that.
Great, thanks all.
Okay. Mr. Please come up, and anybody who, when you recognize, if you could come forward so you can speak into the mic, so those who are watching on TV can hear you, as well as we can capture your voice for our notes and the minutes of the meeting.
And our faces.
And your faces. Yes.
Okay, so I'm Judy.
Okay, just say your name too, please.
You're
about to.
Yeah. From East Middlebury. And I just want, it was a point of clarification, because something was said about there being evidence of archaeological or historical sensitivity in the original Upland Site, and I would like to know more about that. I guess maybe because it's the first time that's come up.
Hey, Derek, why don't you take the end seat, and that way if there's a question, there's a mic right there.
Sure.
And specifically what the evidence is.
Yeah, so to summarize, we had embarked on some outreach with the state archaeologist at the Division of Historic Preservation in evaluating the two sites, the upland and the lowland site. There was no evidence of archaeological resources. That is all held confidential at the state, but there was indication from the archaeologist that the upland site was considered more sensitive than the lowland site. based on the criteria that deem sites archaeological sensitive.
And those criteria are,
So I'm not an archaeologist, but proximity to water resources I know is one. Also view shed and prominence of the terrain is another.
If nobody else. Chris Zioli, Middlebury. Did you look at the southern end of that whole field down by Morse Road?
That's the one, kind of the southern tier of the...
That whole field that you're polluting?
We did. So originally we thought we could keep the Upland Site up on top of that feature, but as we looked into the...
No. This is the southern end.
Right.
Where you are.
So that's what I'm saying. The Upland Site could not accommodate the full 5 megawatts. So where we left was most of the array up top, but about a third or so was down on the lower tier of the site that you referenced.
So I'm talking about down by Morse Road, which is an east-west road that is at the southern end of your field. So your array is going here. Why not look at this direct area here?
Maybe Kathleen, if you could zoom into that. I'm not as familiar with that area, but again, we took an inventory of the college's holdings, and a lot of that was captured before we came to the table. But as I look at that site, without having a great sense of familiarity, I do see more residential properties within close proximity than
Our house is one of them, and so that goes, you're calling us a bunch of NIMBYs, which we're not. So, why not look at that site? It's more out of the view of anybody who comes down off the hillside, driving.
I guess I would disagree. I see much more receptors within close view shed of that site than the proposed site.
And also, you're saying that the view corridor on Route 30, we drove that, unless you stop at certain locations on Route 30, you cannot see that array that would be there on that upland site. So that is totally disingenuous about it being in the view shed of that.
I can just share, I've been up on the top of the site looking to the west, but also on Route 30 looking to the east, and there's very clear line of sight, not only from Route 30, but some of those residences in Cornwall.
So they're more important than we are.
I don't think that's what I said.
That's what it sounds like. Those are my comments. Thank you for listening.
That's college land as well, that we were talking about.
This here is, yes, and that's the upland site.
Yeah, the Upland Site.
I would just add that it's further away from existing three-phase interconnection, so there would need to be a sizable network upgrade to that service to get there.
I guess I do have another question. How do we have teeth to keep what you say you're going to do to what you're going to do? Let's say they're not going to be any more than 10.5 feet off the ground. What if they turn out to be 13 feet? What is our, how do we hold them, how do we hold their feet to the fire to do what they say they're going to do? And not, bring in a lot more posts, telephone poles, and again, higher solar panels than what you said you would be. So how do we know that's what you're saying we're going to end up with is what we're going to end up with?
So I would defer to the select board, but that's, I think, what we're here this evening to discuss, and we were at the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission put forward a set of conditions to address your concern. There will be a laundry list of conditions at the CPG and from the Public Utility Commission, and ultimately what design we put forward to the PUC is what we're committed to building, otherwise it would not be in compliance. So I think there's a few opportunities to enforce our commitments.
And the plantings, the screening plantings, if they die off, will you replace them forever? Keep them going?
Yes, during, at least through the life of the projects. That's our commitment and also a requirement at the PUC.
And your commitment is 20 years?
The life of the project, so our contract is 25 years.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Leslie Kyer Amadora. I live here in Middlebury, Painter Road. I'm a little bit late, so I'm not as technically informed about the project, but I'd like to add, I hope, a perspective to this. I was at the college actually recently at a panel discussion, a forum that involved land stewardship, economy, education, health, arts, among other things. And one of my big takeaways at that was that going forward, I think it's in our best interest to overlap as many of these spheres that we think of as independent spheres as possible. So recognizing that that this is potentially a likely project, I'd like to put out a couple of possibilities. I don't know about feasibility. But coming from an arts background, one of the thoughts that I've had is to capitalize on this if we can, for the sake of the local residents who enjoy this as a recreational area, for our tourism economy, make this a destination. And this is a little bit off the cuff, but I do have some visuals here. I've discovered things like colored panels. There are solar-powered sculptures. I'm sure living in the area that we are with so many creative folks, it may be possible to think of this as an art installation in tandem with being an energy solution, recognizing that this would change, I'm guessing, the cost of things to some degree. I think it's important that we move beyond going forward if we're going to create a community of peace, genuine peace, not kumbaya, but where one need does not, become the be-all, end-all, but that the needs of residents who live in the area, of residents who walk, bike, ride through this area, of those of us who don't live in the area but just appreciate the value in Middlebury that we don't have an industrialized landscape. I think scale is a very significant thing for us here going forward as we plan what we are creating in our community. And I think that to some degree, by adding creativity to the mix, you can mitigate the industrialization. This is a pretty large-scale project, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that there can be other values, there can be other creative values. I know that part of the what's coming from the Planning Commission is that there is a conversation about it becoming a pollinator, I don't know what they're calling it, but like a pollinator garden sanctuary, something to that effect. I think that there are ways that we can support our local farming, our local agriculture, do right by citizens who appreciate the landscape that we have as not being large-scale industrialized. And, if you want to take it to the next step, it could become an educational center on the college's part. We're talking about solar energy, we're talking about pollinators, I think there are a lot of creative possibilities that can be woven into this project potentially.
Thank you. please.
I'm Debbie Tract, I live at, on South Street Extension in Middlebury.
The sheets that she was showing, that she
I have a statement and some questions, but I strongly oppose the siting of this solar array. This is not a matter of solar versus no solar. I've been getting a lot of feedback because I've been very vocal about this, and people say to me, we need solar, and I am right there with them. We absolutely need solar. But this is also a matter of preserving our limited landscape. We're not going to get that valley back once we mar it. Even if it means spending more money to meet both needs, both the solar needs and the needs of preserving our landscape. This issue of where to site large solar arrays is relatively new. We need to be thoughtful in siting such a massive industrial energy project. This is way too enormous in scope to enter into it hastily. I don't know if anyone's taken a ride out to Panton, but the solar array there, which is comparable in size, I believe, is enormous and hard to imagine in that South Street Extension corridor. Encore and Renewables and Middlebury College state that this is the only viable location. I don't believe that. I feel like they're spending an awful lot of time defending this location and trying to convince the community and the powers that be that this is the only location. And I just don't believe that. I believe, first, I don't know if your question was answered about the Route 125. Was that answered?
Yes.
You did. Okay. But for example, not knowing about the other end of that field, you know, there are other holdings, and this is an enormous, massive project, and I feel like it needs due diligence. This is not something to be done hastily, because we can't take it back. I also, I don't understand when you say that the Upland Site is an it's archaeologically sensitive. Does that mean potentially, if it were dug, that something may be found? Wouldn't that be the case anywhere? And also the fact of the skyline, I believe that Upland Site was approved by the Addison County Planning, Regional Planning. So although some may say that a skyline a view is more of a imposition, is the I guess the goal you want to avoid. I would venture to say that this needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis, and I think that the skyline view for those on Route 30 is minimal versus the impact of the view of the large 30-acre array in that little corridor. So I just implore Encore, the college, and I feel like you know, Encore can't speak for the college. Solar's a great thing. I think that the goals of the college are a great thing, but maybe they need to spend a little more money because it's worth it to preserve our open spaces and a beautiful area that we will not get back. And so that's my comment, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay.
A lot of hands up, please.
My name's Bill Biederman, and I actually have a house on South Street. And I have a couple of questions. One, I wanted Victor bringing up the parking lots. Covering the parking lots doesn't just give you solar. It actually cools the earth. It actually creates, it's a great way to cut down on the consumption of fossil fuels because people are not warming their cars up in the winter as long. They're not cooling them down in the summer. There are actually 9 acres of parking lots just on the Middlebury campus. Now you couldn't use all of those. You couldn't get probably a third of your project on there, but it's something to think of. I tend to look at a project like this kind of as a PR play. And if I was bringing my kids to college, do I want to drive them all the way down South Street Extension to say, see, we're green? Wouldn't it be better to walk around the campus and show them everything on the campus? It's a much better way to sell your project and how green you are. Also, I understand you guys are looking at canopy cover, you're talking about bees and things like that. You're talking about 30 acres of coverage that you have to manage. And if you're going to plant all that to wildflowers, it's a lot of volunteer work right now. I don't know if Mike has that much time to do it all. But, you know, I think it's very important how you manage the canopy. The other question I have is, Ms. Trash just mentioned the Regional Planning Commission. Are they actually here tonight? Do we have a representative? All right, and the last question I have is, how is the power coming off the field? What are you doing? Is that being trenched? Are we building more infrastructure? How's it getting to the college? Is it coming all the way down South Street?
Sure, so there is existing single-phase service on South Street that connects to three-phase just north around the Porter Hospital. So that single-phase would be upgraded to three-phase and the power would be generated and fed into the Middlebury grid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Another hands up over here, please.
I am Molly Anderson. I'm a faculty member at Middlebury College. I don't live on South Street, but I'm a member of the Conservation Commission. So I have concerns that were expressed in the initial letter from the Conservation Commission. My question is really, what would the additional cost be if this site were on the Upland site instead of the Lowland site? It's still a bit nebulous to me exactly what the cost difference is and who would bear those costs. There was reference made to other people who would have to pay more, but I don't understand that. That's a little too vague to me. I want to know what the cost difference would be if the college decided to put it on the Upland site, which to me seems to be the preferable site, and who would actually be paying the costs. Thank you.
Derek, are you prepared to speak to that?
Sure, I can take a swing at it. And so, again, the reasons for going from the upland to the lowland was fourfold. The two relevant to the question are geotech and the complex terrain. The geotech, when we need to anchor these systems into bedrock, that adds roughly 10% to the total capital expenditure. We're either doing pilot holes and screwing these systems into the ledge, or we're doing concrete ballast blocks on the surface, which is roughly 10% more expensive. When we did and so the second point is the complex terrain. You've got steep slopes, you've got less efficient production, more wire losses, etc. And when we looked at the upland versus the lowland site was roughly 20% more productive, which equated to around $158,000 per year in production value, or $3.7 million over the life of the project. So again, I think there's other attributes that's equivalent to 1.8 million renewable energy credits per year, 276 cars per year, 150,000 gallons of gasoline. I mean, that's what the college is in it for this project. So they're looking to maximize the yield on their investment in offsetting their carbon footprint. So it's financial, but it's also environmental.
Derek, what's the total cost of the project estimated at?
I do not have that number off the top of my head, but if we, it's just ballpark. Yeah, my calculator's broken. I'll need to get back to you on that.
Mark?
Mark Mooney, Middlebury, interested citizen. I really think the last question you asked is key. I think we should know how much this project is going to cost and the overall financial picture of this project from the perspective of the college, from Encore, and from the town of Middlebury and GMP. So if you don't know that cost.
If I could, and again, sorry to interrupt, and
Sure.
my calculator literally is not working, but so it's going to be ballpark $8 to $9.5 million installed cost.
Okay. Now, you mentioned Middlebury will benefit in taxes. How did you calculate the value of that project for tax purposes?
That's a good question. So the state of Vermont, going back about 5 years, put in place a more clear model on predicting the total value of the project, and that valuation, which is very methodical, derives annual taxation, and it's based on the local tax rate, which we incorporated into that model. So that's where the numbers came from.
What are the numbers?
So in year one, it's starting around 40,000 per year and escalates towards 60,000 over the 25-year term.
For an $8 to $9 million project, $40,000?
40 to 60,000. And that's just for the local property tax. There's also a state education fund component.
I understand that, but so that 40,000 is generated from what figure? In other words, the value of the property.
Is the state valuation on that based upon the actual production versus the cost to build?
It is. It's as an appraiser would look at the valuation of the plant based on the rate of energy and the total production of energy. And again, that's the property, the solar plant, but there's also taxation on the underlying land of these projects.
So right now, we wouldn't know that figure, or when will we know what that figure is?
Yeah, I'm telling you what the projection is. Once the project goes into service, the local assessor works with the State Department of Taxes to formulate the methodology. But again, it's fairly clear, and I can share that with you.
Okay, very clear. Is it going to be anywhere near $8 million?
I mean, over the life of the project, I think we had estimated to be close to $4 million.
So
and again, for no services demanded by the town.
Mark, I think your question is the value for taxation near 8 million? And I'm guessing not.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, and that's, you know, I'm building a building right now that's valued at less than I'm putting into it. That's pretty standard fare for new construction in Vermont these days, unfortunately.
Okay, can you break down the income flow?
In what regard? So effectively, you have a top line generation. You generate as much energy as possible, and then you sell that electricity. In this case, we're selling the energy as a pass-through from Green Mountain Power to the college. The college retains the renewable energy attributes along with the energy, and from there, it's a fairly standard financial pro forma that deducts expenses, taxes, operating expenses, insurance, maintaining the pollinators and vegetation, those sorts of things to get to a bottom line.
Have you come up with an estimate?
On what, the bottom line?
Yeah, in income.
Yeah, so these projects are fairly marginal. That's why we really care about the economics and driving the costs down as much as possible. Otherwise, the projects would not exist. But the equity return on these projects is in the single digits. So as compared to other long-term investments, I would consider it to be very competitive.
Hey, you couldn't give a figure, could you? Or could you?
I mean, again, this is very early in the process, so we don't have exact construction costs. We don't have a lot of things, but the average return for projects of this scale on equity is 6 to 8%.
So 6 to 8% of 8 to 9 million?
It's something like that on an annual basis, 6 to 8% unlevered rate of return.
Okay. I just find it interesting that. And then who determines the charge of the kilowatts or the megawatts at Green Mountain Power?
That's right, Green Mountain Power.
Okay. And they charge that, and the income flow from that goes to Encore?
No, so GMP claiming to be, customer obsessed among their rate base, they are facilitating this project with Encore and Middlebury College, really just collecting a very nominal rider or a fee to facilitate the project, but they're not in it to make money.
I see. And going back to the previous question about the siting, so moving this project up to the higher level, would that prohibit from you cost-wise to pursue that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Steve Meyer. I'm just here to support the project. You have a letter in your packet from me to the Planning Commission, so I won't review all of that with you. I think it's a good site, well designed, well mitigated as far as reasonable impacts. And it's time. It's time for Middlebury to be moving forward more aggressively with renewable power. We're in the midst of a global climate emergency. And I urge you to move this project forward. I also urge you and others to consider the site that Chris suggested and several others. We need more of these in town, so I'm not suggesting an either or, but a both and several more. These are the kinds of projects that as responsible world citizens we should be pursuing, not just reacting to as a community. So I encourage your support and your questions on into the future about where we can do more of these. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I just have a quick comment actually.
Okay.
I don't think anybody in this room is opposing solar, if I'm correct. Am I right? I don't think anybody is opposing solar. It's just a location we are discussing. So I think they're all for green energy. Just want to get that clear.
Hello, I'm Leslie Kameny, South Street Extension, another one of us. I'd like to just read from a statement. Although some might accuse us of NIMBYism, residents in this area have a responsibility to communicate its value as stewards who live and see the impact of the area that the area has on our community. The presentation of the solar array project has made many of us grapple with the difficult and urgent question of how to address the dire need for alternative energy while preserving our beautiful natural landscapes. 5 megawatt arrays are new to Vermont and are big There are only 9 or 10 in the whole state. They often cover 25 to 40 acres. Many of these arrays are sited on brownfields, former mine pits, or landfills. They provide a solution to areas that have limitations for development. The present array siting does not answer how to make these two competing needs, alternative energy and preserving valued landscapes, coexist harmoniously. Rather, it takes a less developed part of the town out of view of the campus with fewer residents to contend with to develop their alternative energy solution. I applaud Middlebury College for trying to do their part in finding alternative energy solutions on their campus. At the same time, due to their own energy goals that they've set, they are demanding a lot from the community. Sacrifice of a beloved viewshed, which they themselves have preserved and identified as unique. Sacrifice of the land abutters who will look over this industrial array for the rest of their lifetimes. I would implore the college to think more creatively about siting their 30-acre, 5-megawatt array. Go back to the Upland Site, broaden its vision about this difficult balance between preserving our natural world and meeting our alternative energy goals. Become the innovator to help address these serious issues and help forge a path for other rural communities. There is no way to comment on this project to the Vermont Public Utility Commission except through the comments and endorsements of the Select Board, Regional Planning Commission, and land abutters. Therefore, I ask the Select Board to deny endorsement of the siting of the proposed outsized 5-megawatt solar array and encourage the college with its partners to reimagine how these industrial-sized arrays can fit into our community. Thank you. We would like to also present to you a petition that we asked people to sign rejecting this site, and there are 72 names signed and 21 online, which we haven't figured how to get to you, but we will. And I'd like to give this to you.
You could give that to Kathleen.
Give it to Kathleen. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, so I'm Jeff Howarth. I'm a professor at the college. I'm also live on Short Shannon Street, so own a house there and have 2 little kids, so I'm tired. That's why. I think this core question for me is, in terms of planning for climate change, is this the best use of this property? So I think what concerns me about the current proposal, I believe Middlebury College owns 10% of Middlebury. I don't think they have any land in conservation easement right now in the town of Middlebury. And I think that when you're looking at climate change, what we can expect is we can expect more rain and more floods, and the need to kind of consider flood control, and we can consider a lot more stress on wildlife and the need to move, and the need to have more connectivity among habitat in Middlebury. And I think for me the concern with Energy 2028 is it's narrowly focused on the energy demands of the city on the hill, and rather than a broader perspective of climate change, planning for climate change in Middlebury. So what I would like to see is the college do a little bit more of a plan for what are the best uses of the various properties to plan for the future that we're inheriting in 20 years, or if not longer than that. When we have hopefully even more people living in downtown Middlebury, and we have maybe more solutions to the housing crunch, and the needs of having these rural places near the urban centers that are like refuges for people to get a break become even more important. And so just a little bit of a vision of what do you want Middlebury to look like in 25 to 30 years, and and be prepared for the pressure to develop more and more of the rural and countryside for solar, because it feels like a good thing to do, and they need to have a plan or what are the most suitable places for solar development in Middlebury. What are the most suitable places for wildlife connectivity? What are the most suitable places for kind of flood protection? Shouldn't we be, the alternative use of this area is to restore it as a functioning wetland with a matrix of clay plain forest and other habitats. That's an alternative use of the area. And I'd like to see the college explore those alternatives before kind of going further with the current plan. Thanks.
Is there anyone else? Please. I'm gonna, you'll be the last one, and we're gonna have some select board discussion, so.
Great. Hi, I'm Will Amadon. I'm also a professor at the college, a geology professor. I actually don't live in Middlebury, but I recreate here and work here. I think I'm still allowed to speak. So my main comment here is that this project is driven by the college, but it's going to outlive the college. It's going to, not going to outlive the college, but it's going to outlive the proponents at the college, right? This is going to be at least 25 years, probably 50 when it's all said and done. So the people who are pushing this now are going to be gone. And I think that you as the select board should think about this in the interest of the town, you know, because really it's going to be on you in 50 years when all of us at the college have moved on. So I think that's the lens. And I also think that really, although these projects unfortunately don't fall under Act 250, they don't fall under county environmental review, so they don't really fall under any review. Despite that, they really are industrial sites that are semi-permanent. So I think you could view this as an industrial site that's being built, in my mind, in a really special place, which is in this corridor along Otter Creek. You've got Creek Road on one side, you've got South Street on the other side. These places are spectacular. And it's hard to kind of monetize the value that these places have to the town. But I can tell you, I used to live on South Street for 4 years, and every time I would go down Creek Road, go down South Street, it would absolutely blow my mind. And I would think, I'm the luckiest person in the world to live here in this place. And so I just think that as you think about siting this thing right in the heart of that area, you know, think about what that's worth to the town over the long run. And that's really my main objection. And I think I was able to visit the site with Derek and others. And when I saw the first site, I was ecstatic. I was like, wow, we're going to fit a 5 megawatt solar site. It's going to be almost invisible. So I was surprised when you guys moved it, although I understand. Which does lead me to one kind of tactile question for you, which is, what exactly does the viewshed analysis look like? I'm envisioning this landscape in my mind and having a hard time seeing this thing from Route 30. But I also haven't dug through all the documents. Could you describe that a little bit, or?
So you have it.
There's on the Middlebury Selectboard packets, there's actually a nice view shed.
Yep.
I think I may be able to pull it up there. If you could continue.
Yeah, I don't want to slow things down too much, but I guess I would just say I'm skeptical that view shed is the real driver here. Just thinking about the landscape in my mind, it seems to me that cost is probably the real driver, and that's a really legitimate thing. And I appreciate, Derek, that you were able to answer put some numbers on the additional cost, which I think is really important. What I heard was something like 10% additional construction costs on an $8 million project. So about $800,000. But you also mentioned a little bit of reduced generation capacity. So I'm not sure what that adds up to as well, but you know, if we take $1 million as the added cost over revenues, I think projected close to 15 to 20 million over the course of the lifetime of the project, maybe more if it goes more than 25 years. So we're really looking at kind of 5 to 7% of the construction cost, 5 to 7% cut on the lifetime returns, right? So
Actually, it said 20% less production per year.
Per year.
So if you added that up, you're up in the millions.
Yeah.
Based upon.
That's fixed versus single access.
Yeah, so there's a few things going on. It's fixed versus single axis, but it's also the geometry of the array, more array losses, just complex terrain. So again, there were the 4 criteria that had us move from the upland to the lowland. And I can share, that was a really tough decision, especially after committing to the upland site and meeting with you and other folks and just, kind of selling the college on that site. That was our preferred site, our least impact alternative. And it wasn't until we started doing some of these detailed evaluations that we realized that it was not viable. So again, it's the 10% construction cost plus the reduced output. That's the 3.7 million over the life. So, and yeah, as far as the view shed, I think Kathleen's finally honed in on it. But yeah, so again, it's more dispersed impact. But it's much broader across the region, and again, the skylining. So that's the South Street, the lowland site, but I'm not sure if before or after that, that shows in context what maybe keep going. Yeah, so that's the view shed from the upland site. And again, if you can scroll just to the north there, Kathleen, to the previous page, you'll see that's a layout there on its side of where we ended up on that upland side. So it's much more than just the upland. A lot of that terrain was deemed off limits, and I think to what I thought was Chris's question was it bled off to the south down into that wetland complex. So it just became inefficient and not feasible.
I feel like that's actually a different view shed map, because I think that one, you scroll up. To the map that actually shows the purple. And so right now, the other map that I saw actually, so it had a qualitative thing of the number of the observation points that would be visible, because what you were showing is actually the larger spread, you wouldn't ever see the full array. And when it became the more concentrated view, you would always see the full array. So and you took out that qualitative difference in these, because it's just yes or no, is it visible, but you're not telling how much of the array is visible in these view shed maps. And so,
yeah, if I could, and I wish I was the expert in the room, but I'm going to pass that one to Mike Boucher if he cares to answer it. But maybe getting confused with the perspectives of where we selected the renderings.
No, because actually one of those in class the other day.
Okay.
But it wasn't this map; it was the one that showed the shades of purple of the visibility. Because the idea was that you see the array over a slightly larger area, but you never see the full array. And so it's a qualitative difference because the way these things are based is you have all these points in here, and you're just trying to do line of sight. Is it visible? And so when this is color coded over here, it's telling you the number of points within the array that are visible at that location. So this one was all dark purple because you would largely see the whole array here. But it was up on the hill with primarily light purple in the perimeters because you would never get a view of the entire array or all of the observation points in the array. And we talked about this as like why view shed maps are problematic because they're hard to read unless you really know how to that was one of the concepts.
Do you want me to provide some explanation? That's true. We changed, instead of having a graduated view shed map because it was being compared from one to another. And comparing, and we use that a lot. So first of all, view shed maps are a preliminary tool. They're not, there's severe limitations based on data, available data. This is a good location because there's quality LiDAR data. This is a vegetated view shed, so it uses the first return to create obstructions. The problem with the way that we run our view shed points, so if you look in here, there's actually a grid of points. We're not running a view shed from the actual panels themselves. And what it's not doing is it's not showing how the array actually hides itself. So if you're in a flat plane like that, it's saying, well, if I'm standing over on this road, you can see the whole project. But the reality is you're not going to see the whole project. Most of those first rows of panels are going to substantially hide panels behind that. And these don't really reflect that shading ability of the project itself. So the graduated symbology is really helpful when you're looking at a map on its own, but when you're trying to compare the two, it's really misleading. So that's why we decided to just do a holistic, non-graduated color.
It seems like that would only be a problem if you were at the same elevation as well.
Mm-hmm.
It would only be a problem if you're at the same elevation as well.
But this is generally, where you're seeing it from in this area, most of that concentrated visibility in this area, you're pretty much down at the level of the project. There is some areas when you start going up the hill to the north where it opens up more. But at the same time, it's not really indicative of the Upland site. The graduation gave a much larger perception of, well, you're going to have much lower intensity of views, which quite honestly that's not how I interpreted the results myself for running the viewshed map, so we felt that that was misleading as a comparative exhibit.
Great, and I'll step off.
You haven't spoken yet.
So I'm Monica Prisperhart. This conversation brings up one of my bigger concerns, that it seems like the viewshed is one of the biggest reasons for placing the panels where we're trying to place the project. And I want to suggest that while we are afraid of impacting our view, we're also assuming here that solar panels are inherently ugly and we're trying to hide them from view. And I want to suggest that what is making them ugly to us is not the panels themselves. I have solar panels on my roof, and I'm very proud of them. And to me, they're beautiful because of what they represent. I think if the project is placed correctly, then we won't be worried about the viewshed. It's something that we can maybe find beautiful as a community because it's what it represents our energy independence. And so as we're thinking about the placement, I'm wondering how much of that discussion of how much the driver is based on these viewshed maps. I don't think we'll see the project as equally beautiful or equally ugly depending on where it is. I think the reason that there's a concern of them not being beautiful along South Street is because we think it's beautiful as it is. It's this beautiful agricultural land that we're afraid will be lost. We see it as beautiful wildlife habitat and wetlands. What we're seeing when we imagine this project is the alternatives. So I just want to suggest that that be part of this as well.
Okay, well, I thank everyone for their comments. I promised you the last time you came that we would have this opportunity, so we've gone way over time, but I think it was my obligation to you based upon what we talked about last time. I'd like to pivot and talk, actually, is there anyone from the college that would like to say something after hearing all the comments? Okay. Joe, I'd like to come back to the select board and ask where you'd like to go from here.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
So I had, based on some of the comments, a couple of questions that came up for me. In the final plan, conditions, however you want to phrase it, is there anything that is specified for end of life? Like if, let's just big if, it stops working, generating power at 25 years, what happens and what becomes of it? Is there anything to plan for it? Who pays for it? Is there anything like that or not?
Yeah, there is. Good question. So in the state of Vermont, under statute, any project over 1 megawatt of capacity does require a letter of credit bond. So same as cash. It's not Encore's bond, it's the PUC's bond that we would be posting before we can start work. And the PUC holds that bond during the life of the project. And upon the end of the useful life of the project, the decommissioning would be required, and those funds would be spent towards the reclamation of the site. And so again, it's based on a validated decommissioning cost. The Agency of Agriculture has their input on the reclamation criteria, so any soils that have been decompacted or have been compacted would be decompacted. There's soil density testing both before and after to reach those points. Amendments are made to the soil if necessary to reach the same composition or better. And yeah, again, I hear a lot of the concerns being, permanent occupation of the site, and I would contend that this is a temporary use of the site. We're not pouring a bunch of concrete and parking lots, and that it's a medium-term use of the site that does lend towards long-term alternative uses of the property.
So this is going to be a little bit of a stretch imagination question, but if Middlebury wanted to be energy independent with solar, how big, do you have any idea, can you give me any sense of like, how much solar would we have to install? Do we have enough land to do it?
Is
Like-
Middlebury College or Middlebury?
No, like so, if, I'm just trying to imagine like, and maybe this is too far out in the weeds, but can we ever achieve, like, what would we have to cover everything? Or could we do it in a smaller amount? You know what I'm trying to ask her, that I'm not articulating very well?
You're doing a good job. So I'll take a shot. So the output of this project is estimated to produce roughly 30% of the college's total electric demand. So in simple terms, you could say, well, do 15 megawatts and you address the total load. But there is some nuance there in that these projects do generate when the sun shines, and the college uses energy in the night and in the winter. So that's where the battery storage component really does help. So you can't just keep throwing more solar after more solar. There really does need to be diversification of energy mix, and I think that is pretty well encapsulated in the 2028 plan. Energy efficiency, thermal efficiency, and electric renewable energy. So again, there is a point of diminishing returns of adding more solar to reach those goals. Battery storage helps with that, but it's not a silver bullet. There's no perfect source and there's no perfect site.
So I just think about it in terms of like, how much land do we set aside for solar, and how much, how many projects do we consider of this size, and so just things like that I think about, I guess. And what is, when we talk about the future, what does that mean for Middlebury? How many of these sites do we have to have? Where do we put them to come close to having some impact on climate change? Thanks.
Other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, Derek, on this, and it's an evolving technology. Yeah, and Fahad said it right, we're all solidly behind renewables and doing that. I still continue to be a little bit skeptic on solar in a climate such as ours, especially since it's based even on a 4-hour battery. That means the lights are going out right now. But does GMP have to buy this power? And the reason I ask this is that it is evolving. Technology of these panels is going along and is advancing. And there's going to be winners and losers in the solar generation. Some companies are going to fail. If another producer comes along and appointed with a new generation panel in 5 years, and they're getting 50% better generation or more, would GMP then opt to buy from the better producer, as opposed to what this be? And is there a scenario where you'd be forced to upgrade and be able to actually do it? Or could this essentially become a non-producer? Could it basically be sitting out there because they're going to buy power from economical sources? And could they walk away from the site?
Yeah, it's a good question. So because these projects have a high capital cost on the front end, once they're operating, they're very low expense projects as opposed to other kind of fossil fuel generators. We do need a contract in order to finance the projects, and those are typically 25-year terms in order to leverage those cash flows or revenue streams to make the investment. So we would be contracted. Does GMP have to buy the power? That's probably a legal question. There are some federal precedents around open access to the grid and ensuring there is a mechanism for purchasing power that's generated. But they really want to facilitate this project with one of their anchor customers in the community. As far as the technological advancements, yes, there will be more efficient technology over the 25-year term, as we've seen with most any technology. But we're seeing the incremental advancements in the solar panels become more linear. There is great advancements in the battery storage component, but the density of solar output per acre or per module is relatively on a flat increase. So again, we would, we're contracted through the term of the project, but what happens after 25 years, it really comes down to what is the higher and better use of the property. Is it to continue generating? Is it to repower the project and seek, additional permits, or is it to remove the project and go back to agriculture? Is it to go to clay plain forest restoration? That's a decision at that point.
Can I say something real quick? I think, Nick, what you're asking about, it's called a power purchase agreement, and there's tons of information out there on it. And we don't actually go into a spot market versus places like Delaware, Maryland, DC, and that have different kinds of contracts. So you'll actually find something that would answer, I think, any questions that need answered.
Lindsay? Yeah, there's been the question of what the sound will be like, what kind of noise will be generated. Will the most local residents be able to hear it? If I decided to ride my bike down South Street, would I be able to hear it? South Street extension.
Sure, so it has come up quite a bit, and it's super valid. So yes, there are really, on a project like this, 3 components that would generate energy. There are the inverters that convert the energy from direct current to AC. Those are distributed among the array. There's the transformers that take the AC power and step it up to distribution voltage. And then there's the battery storage component, which has a lot of the same gadgets, but also some cooling fans that do generate small amounts of energy. For the solar, I think it's important to note that those components only generate power while the sun is shining, so there's no nighttime noises. We will be modeling this as part of our CPG filing. There's very rigorous standards and thresholds that need to be met. The setback that we have from the street and the residences certainly will mitigate that, but the battery storage components will be in a container, so those provide insulation for acoustics. So the short answer is it will be well within the threshold, which is equivalent to like a sound of a refrigerator at the receptors, and it's something we've committed to the neighbors to modeling on their back porch with them before the project is built. So I hope that provides some context, but we will have an acoustic impact assessment that we'll file with the CPG.
I was so impressed with the quality of comments from participants tonight, and I can see how very, very hard this is. And I'm also seeing how hard it was for the Planning Commission to consider all of this, and I am grateful for their response, and I do hope that we follow their response. I think, to your point, that if we're going to have it, what can we do to create value for the community that will miss this as they've seen it, and can there be a creative solution? Can we make it artful? And can we build recreational enhancements, because we know that we are a destination for recreation, all kinds of recreation, which we just heard about in our community mapping project presentation. So hopefully the college could respond to that. So they're talking about a trail, but as I think Jeff, you said, we have Creek Road, we have South Street, and there is an opportunity to create a whole recreational loop, that could be completed with some kind of bridge that could go over at 3 Mile, to complete the whole loop. That would really enhance it and then attract people that way too. So I'm really grateful for your questions, Mark, about costs, that give us some benchmark for how we assess the value of it and what we get back, what we could hopefully get back and then use toward some of this perhaps. So thank you everyone for your participation tonight. I'm still, struggling with, do we have the right site? We know we want a large project like this, that we need it all. We need ones that cover the parking lots too, and we need it all. To Steve's point, we need it all, and we need it quickly. And I understand that you need a return on investment in order to get that quickly, so I'm trying to weigh that.
So let me ask the board, do you feel like you're ready to act on this tonight, or would you like some time to think about it? There's a lot of good points brought up, but I think a lot of good input. It's very clear it's not a consensus decision at this point. Like Bill made a point about the parking lots and everything, but I think I understand on that one that we can't net meter and we would end up with a really fractured system throughout the town. Some of these things I can reconcile. There's certainly some things I'd love to know in the mitigation plan. I think that the Planning Commission gave you some ideas on some mitigation factors, and I'd like to see how that transpires and what that would look like as you move forward in the plan. So I don't know if you would, if you're ready to do something this evening. Or?
Well, I would just like to know, and I don't think Derek is the person to answer this question, but someone from the college. Does the college unconditionally accept the Planning Commission's conditions?
So I'll answer that. Matt Curran, Director of Business Services at Middlebury College. Thank you. Yes, to answer your question, the college does accept the conditions that the Planning Commission brought forward, adding the trail out there, increasing the screening that's going to be brought in front of the panels. I'm trying to think of the other conditions.
No more solar between the...
Yeah, no more solar extending north from the current array up to South Street Extension, and...
Connection to the hospital?
Connection to the hospital. Thank you, Leslie. I appreciate that. So one question that the Planning Commission brought up was the discussion around how does the community benefit from this solar project? And what we are working on, and it's not finalized by any means, but by including potentially this battery bank and developing a microgrid so that this battery bank could power the hospital in the event of a blackout in the area so that the hospital can maintain its operations. That is unfortunately not something that Middlebury or Encore can do. That is a Green Mountain Power item, and we are in discussions with them, and it is something that they are exploring and that they want to do. They just have to make sure that that's feasible.
Was a pollinator habitat part of the plan?
Yes, it was
Yeah.
pollinator as well. Thank you.
Okay.
I should have the list, and I don't. I apologize.
So would that include, as somebody mentioned, would that include like the ongoing maintenance of that habitat? Would that come from the college?
Yeah, Matt, I'll take that one. That one's on Encore, so as the
Okay.
investor, owner, operator, we would be committed to fulfilling that condition.
I guess I mean, it's a very difficult decision. Obviously, we all recognize that we have an environmental crisis, a profound existential crisis. We're an invasive species, and nature is taking its revenge, and there's no question about that. At the same time, I'm troubled by the manner in which the college has gone about this. I'm connected to the college. I have been since 1962. Retired, however, and no longer receiving pay from the college. But it seems to me that I also rather strongly believe that this is the town's college. And before the college became rich and famous, the town created the college and supported it before it became rich and famous. And it seems to me that the college has really not involved the town until this late date. There have been proposals made that this really is not only the larger town's problem. We need to deal with alternate sources of energy. And in certain senses, I wish people would stop using aesthetic terms carelessly. Solar panels are not beautiful. I'm sorry. It's not a matter of beauty, it's a matter of utility and meeting a crisis. And that's what we ought to be talking about seriously. And I think the college has really not addressed this issue with the town. And I think we have to go back, step back, and engage in that conversation. I have to say that Derek, you've done your job well. I have no doubt of your competence, and it seems to me that we're not talking about the technology or the provider. We're talking about the institution that started this, that somehow, and someone mentioned, it does seem like a public relations venture before it became a serious community responsibility. And I think the college has to start over by engaging the town as a responsible member of the town, of the community. It hasn't done this. And I might say, as someone who's connected with the college, it's made me ashamed. So I cannot support this venture, this particular venture, but I very strongly support the town and the college engaging in finding alternative renewable sources of energy.
Is anybody ready to vote tonight?
Let's say I was when we came in.
I was too.
I actually was leaning toward this, in spite of my skepticism, but I also, I see where it can fit into the picture. And then I started, it's one of the benefits of being in this position, and it's one of the challenges sometimes of being in the position, is one forms an opinion, and then people go along and bring out very valid ideas and changes. I mean, this is tonight's notes. And so, to answer your question, Brian, no, I'm not ready. I need to digest what I've heard to be able to do this justice.
I kind of sense that, and that's why I was trying to get to that, because we do have a fairly full agenda to continue. I thank everybody for coming, and I appreciate your input. And you know, we're only going to make things better if everybody's talking and working through some of these issues. Wherever it goes, it's going to be in somebody's backyard, and we want to make sure wherever it goes, it's the best project that we can come up with. And so, appreciate all your input. We do have an opportunity to engage the college on this some more. We're going to be having the select board meets with the college quarterly, and we'll be talking about it. So it will be on a future agenda for us. And Derek, thank you for all your time and education. We'll be back in touch to clarify some of the questions that come up as we're talking amongst the board.
That sounds good. I appreciate the opportunity and glad to be back. I just want to make sure that the select board is not missing an opportunity in exerting its position as we do go to the Public Utility Commission, which we fully intend to do over the next few weeks. So
we have a meeting next week.
Okay. So what should we consider as the next steps?
It'll probably be on next week's agenda.
With the decision.
You don't necessarily have to be here, because mostly our focus next week will be amongst the board, really. I feel we've given an opportunity for all the public input, and we've gotten tons of it. So,
I think the amount of concerns that people have shown today, the college should take a step forward and address some of those concerns. I think it impacts the whole town. It's not just the South Street. And I keep hearing this that only the neighbors, the NIMBY not in my backyard. It's not the case. Everybody uses that as a recreational place. So I want to make sure that people know that it's not just the neighbors who are being affected. And we should be mindful. The college has a relationship with the town. We adore the college because it's our asset. But the town also is an asset to the college also. And we should work together.
Right, can I just say one thing? I know we can't really discuss this any further, but I do take issue. Oh, sorry. Sue Ritter, Middlebury College. I wasn't prepared to speak on this particular topic tonight, but I do take issue with any notion that we have not been collaborative with the town on our ideas. You and I have had multiple discussions about collaborating on hydro and other alternative energy sources. So this has not just been us sitting up here doing what we want, and we have engaged the town. So I don't want that left unsaid, and I'm happy to provide history of those discussions. But you know, we do take seriously the town's input on this and where we want to go. It's very, very important to us as a community that we collaborate. But to say that we have had no involvement or no discussions with the town on our energy initiatives, especially since Lori is very passionate about moving forward with the town to design something along the lines of what Oberlin has done to bring the town along with our energy initiatives and to collaborate as best as possible. That is one of Lori's major goals. So I don't want that to be left unsaid. That's all I want to say.
And that's actually true. I mean, we've been before Planning Commission quite some time ago. I think that the shift in the only thing that I think got dropped was the shift in the positioning of the solar project, because I think people were aware of the Upland, and when it dropped to the current position, I think that was the part that was a surprise to.
It was a surprise to us too.
Yeah.
We didn't know that was coming until it did.
Well,
but we had to rely on the
just to
experts for when.
clarify on that point, it was in October of 19, that the Planning Commission did express their support of the lowland site once it was revised. And then last time we were here, you guys sent us to the Planning Commission for their review and recommendation. That took 2 swings based on their diligence and public impact. They recommended endorsement of the project that was conditional, and so it's been twice that they've supported the project with conditions at the lowland site.
Yeah, I did see that in the packet. I had missed that you'd moved the location of it until you came before the board, so or actually until I started hearing from citizens. But we'll vet some of the discussion and do our own research and put it on our calendar to make a vote and a position and issue our position next week.
Great, thank you.
Judy, are you still here? Is Judy still here?
We have
We have a full agenda.
I know, I just did it.
We even have an full executive session.
Including a full executive session. Yes, please, Judy. Okay, Judy's here to review some of the provisions of the town tree policy. We got the whole committee, great.
So, I believe you have the draft that has the corrections, the edits, and, and then the one that's clean. So, these edits generally were made by either Bill Kernan or Dan Warner for the purposes of, well, I think in a lot of cases, the purposes of clarity. And so that's one reason. The other reason is that we need to do a periodic review in order to renew our Tree City USA status. So I'm willing to answer whatever questions you might have.
Does anybody have any questions on those reviews, on those minor revisions?
Makes sense.
I thought it was pretty straightforward, and I thought Bill and Dan have had a chance to review, and you guys are obviously good with their input.
So we passed it, back and forth a couple of times. The very bottom where it says, I wasn't sure how to, I think I actually put in date revised, if that's the correct terminology, and then date of revisions accepted or adopted, whatever the language is that you use.
I'll make a motion to adopt the proposed revisions to the Town of Middlebury tree policy as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Laura, would you care to vote on the adoption of the tree policy? I know you've read it.
I vote in favor.
In favor, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Have anybody been asked about the sign, Tree City?
I notice it all the time.
Yeah, but I mean, have you been asked about it? It's fun, I mean, people notice it, yeah. It's exciting.
The one on Cook Street, right?
Yeah.
There are two.
Yeah.
That's all.
There's also the plaque on the wall.
Yes. So we're hoping to add the new date.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next, we're considering a Downtown Improvement District Commission request for current year DIDC budget expenditure for the purchase and installation of sidewalk frames for events during the downtown bridge construction project. Staff looked at potential policy considerations. It looks like it's acceptable as long as it's on the town's property. There was some discussion about whether the two that are to be sited up by the college should be moved onto the town's property, but frankly, that can be worked out through the period. But what they're really looking for is to buy the sandwich boards now. Next year, during the main part of the construction, we won't have that overhead sign. This is to replace the marketing and events promotion that we can do on that we do typically on that sign. So it'd be the 6 freestanding sign frames. And any questions on that?
No, I'm going to move it, that we approve DIDC's recommendation to allocate $1,000 from the current year DIDC budget to fund the purchase of the 6 sidewalk sign frames and brackets.
Second. Can I just make a quick comment?
Yes.
I just want to thank Kathleen and staff for, because I had questioned policy, and I just appreciate the time and making sure that we're following our own rules. So thank you for following up on that.
Good question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. So I need to recuse myself because CP Brick and Mortar happens to be me. So this next one is Heather's going to lead.
So we have a request for a stormwater easement on town-owned property to the north of CNP's 453 Exchange Street parcel. If the board is amendable, the next step would be to initiate the section 1061 notification process, which you guys will recall we've done for other utilities requesting similar easements. It seems pretty straightforward. Does anyone have any questions or discussions or requests for more information? Okay. If the board is amendable, there are 2 motions that we need to make.
I'll make a motion to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to work with Town Council to initiate the required 30 days Section 1061 public notification process for conveyance town-owned property.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? No? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay.
I also move if no citizens petitions objecting to the conveyance is received in the town clerk's office within the 30-day comment period, I move to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to sign the easement deed with CNP Brick and Mortar LLC.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a little background on that. The town staff has looked at it. There is a minor concern as far as the cover of the force main that goes down through there. And we'll be committed to making sure it has proper cover. We're working with Otter Creek Engineering. And DeBishop Excavating is the one doing that retention pond. And so we have local people working on it. So I feel pretty good that we can meet our commitment to the town. Well, thank you for the support. A follow-up to the Middlebury legislators meeting. Is there any, one of the things that we got some more feedback on the homelessness issues, some letters, and I think we have made a commitment to get back to the legislators on some data. And I don't know if Chief has had a chance to pull any of that together, but I think maybe we can make a list of it. I did talk with legislators, and they're willing to champion getting funding for a screener here. And so Amy Sheldon has said that she feels like she's the chair of one of the House committees and can work with the other chairs to try to get some support for that here in Middlebury and Madison County. I think that was probably one of the things that came out that it's really critical as far as being able to minimize the amount of time that our police are required to be out of the service area in transporting. If they could have screenings local and have to transport fewer people, then there would be a lot more time that they could devote to the local issues. So I think that's Chief's biggest challenge is the manning. And so that was one of the things that we committed to trying to give enough data that the case for a screener can be built. Was there anything else that was a takeaway from that for you?
I'm glad we met, and when we meet, we come up with these discussions and we have solutions now. And I would really hope that we have a frequency we establish, we every quarter, every 6 months, and keep that. So they will be informed of what we are dealing with, and we have questions to ask them.
Go ahead.
Well, I think for me personally, it was what I hoped for and more. I found the last time, my own personal view, is last time we met with them, it felt a little rushed, and this time by dedicating that time and having some good dialogue was worthwhile. I found every one of them, I know they heard us, and I know they're thinking about how to help. These issues are not fast to solve. None of us have visions of this thing being a single or multiple legislative siege and solution, but the fact that there is a solution seems to be arising to one of our most immediate concerns makes me feel quite good, and very thankful for all of them for coming and helping, and all of you for the dialogue that went into it. So it was a good session. I agree with Fahad. It's nice to do this more often.
I do think those are great comments, Nick, and do agree and appreciate us having that time. One further thing, I think a long-term discussion on what Chief was talking about was a more local place for housing people. He talked a lot about, either having to go to Rutland or Burlington, and not, once they have the screening done, they still have somewhere to take these people somewhere. And I don't know what that process looks like and who we talk to and how you get that ball rolling, but starting that conversation of trying to find a place locally, so that, because that helps our manpower situation also, if we can locally, and it's probably a several years out solution, but how do we start that process, and how can our representatives help us with that? And I know the local recovery center has tried citing some recovery places in Middlebury and has come up against some opposition, and it's a difficult conversation, but I think something that we might have to be having sooner rather than later. So
right, and it's so multifaceted and difficult, but I like what Rutland has done with Project Vision and creating 3 different subcommittees. They have one on crime and safety, one on substance abuse, and one on community and neighborhood housing. We do have an Addison County Housing Coalition that meets, and I visited that meeting this past week, and I was really informed well about the very issues you're talking about, Heather, and just, how are we going to tackle that? It's complex and difficult, but there are some concrete things we could do, and our Public Health and Safety Committee could look at a specific thing like, where should we house people, and see if we can come up with that. We had all of those stakeholders at that meeting of emergency responders, and I would see that as the next logical step, and maybe that's a good agenda item for January. So I would be willing to talk to Chief Hanley about that and help him organize, the stakeholders that would attend that and see where we go.
Can I make one other quick comment? We also had that email from, was it Brian? No.
Randy?
No, Barnes? Last name Barnes? Used to be the VCF. Anyway, obviously can't remember the name.
That sent it to us and the legislators?
Yeah, that was interested in helping.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I guess I don't necessarily want to take time on talking about it tonight, but at maybe some point in the future, having more discussion about the possibility of a subcommittee of the Public and Safety Committee that maybe looks...
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Same thing. But we could talk about it at the Public Health and Safety Committee, like what is it, what do we call it, who convenes it, so I think we want to nail that down a little better. And I've been doing the research, these last couple of weeks in response to the issue to see how we can go forward.
So just, again, not that we have to talk about it tonight, but let's not lose sight of that, and either through the public health and safety, how do we move forward on some of these things?
I think Neighbors Together might have a role in this too, by the way. Okay.
So I think we start with getting some stuff from Chief that kind of quantifies it. So that that'll inform our discussion a little bit better. What's next? Okay. Approval of the check warrants. Next, you got them tonight?
Yes, I do.
I think we have
There's one.
another college lunch.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm looking for is the list of the last, Kathleen, when did you put the list of who had done what?
We had that
It was in the last select
board packet.
I think it might have been 2 ago. I couldn't find it in the last select board packet.
I think it was in the last one.
Was it the last one?
Yeah.
Fine.
That reminds me, I don't know where the Dr. Dining Hall is, so.
Do you all want to meet here?
Is it walkable from here?
Where is this?
It is, but...
Proctor is up on the hill.
Yeah, it's closer to Vine Hall.
It's,
That's a typical, typical
just
Vermont
beyond,
direction.
it's beyond the chapter.
It's up on the hill.
Behind the chapter.
You just go up on the hill and you'll find it.
Yeah.
Before the lake.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
There is a.
Right where the tree burned 10 years ago?
There is a parking lot back there.
By the barn, it used to be red.
Do you find it?
Oh,
I'm looking for it. That's what tripped me up here.
But what are you trying to work out, like who the next person would be?
I don't know, you have, let's go ahead. That's really what.
There it is.
Okay, so I wanted that so you could look at it. So, is there anything that's not on the agenda when you looked at it that you feel should be on the agenda? We're finalizing the agenda. You'll notice that as we talked about, Kathleen is going to have a kind of a read-ahead sheet for the items down below the top 3. As you can see, the Energy 2028 discussion is top on the list. That's one of the reasons why I feel we ought to have a discussion with them about some of the stuff that came out tonight and see what commitments the college has before we vote. And then child care efforts to provide more child care to the working community, and then the Creek Road discussion is the top three. We'll be prepared to discuss those in length.
Where did childcare come from? Did
That's
we
what
have
I
that?
was going to ask.
It came from a
college
discussion from the
requested that.
college, yeah.
Good for their employees.
The college is working with Porter, and so this isn't just our, they're looking for some support from the town.
I can tell you they will get it.
I'm sorry?
Childcare for under 3-year-olds in this town is really, really challenging.
It is, but how can the town help?
But I'd like to find out what they're thinking.
Okay. So knowing that's our agenda.
I think the first item will take up a lot of your time.
I'm sorry?
The first item will take up most of your time.
That's why we were thinking that those first three might be
That should be enough.
really the most majority of what we're going to discuss.
Right.
So I'll just chime in to try to move us along. I know Nick had suggested and encouraged us to consider Victor. Victor's gone a couple of times ago. Laura's been a little further out, and I know she's expressed her desire to rotate off the board, and this may be her last opportunity to participate. And I think she brings a good, open-minded, struggling approach to this whole conversation of the Energy 2028. So I think I would be supportive of us considering giving Laura this opportunity, knowing that that I don't think the energy conversation is ending with this lunch, and that Victor, having a couple more years in his term, would have another opportunity to go maybe the next lunch. So
I have a question for maybe Kathleen, Brian, the whole board. What is our protocol? Do we rotate regularly, or do we go by what needs to be talked about? Or does everybody get a chance once in a while? How does it work?
it's been sort of a...
I thought everybody takes a turn, that's what I thought before.
It was typically that the chair, the vice chair, and then we were rotating.
Yes, that's what I heard. Yeah. Now we are.
It wasn't an ABC rotation, but it was trying to at least do some version of fair share rotation.
So that would mean that Nick would be next if we were going to use the rotation model.
Yeah, that might, if it's agenda based, then whoever has more weight, they can go. If it's based on the rotation, then, so we have to, I think we should decide what we do.
So I appreciate, Heather, what you said about my attending for this particular lunch. I'm also okay with Nick being the representative at that lunch. And I'm also okay with being there. I just felt like, because I am, now that it's being said, intending to rotate off the board, that maybe it would be better for Nick.
Well, I'm actually thinking, as I'm also looking at the agenda that now has emerged and the things that are the dominant topics of conversation. Personally, I think I would prefer to be on the next one. And the rationale behind that is we're going to be approaching the heavy bridge construction season. And there probably will be things that probably would be the dominant topic on the next one. And I would personally prefer to be a part of that discussion. Because there are certain things that one would want to be able to fill them in on protocol that will happen during the bridge construction period. See how they are as far as possibly adapting. And that could be one of the questions just to raise, is how much consideration they've given to adapting their work schedules in different departments so we're not putting a solid load at the commuter hours on. But that'd be my personal preference.
Or you would prefer to wait?
I prefer to wait.
All right, I'll go.
Then why don't let it be Laura?
Okay,
So we settled it.
are we all in agreement that Laura will be the next?
Yeah.
And then, and are we okay with this? Is there anything that anybody's seeing that they would, that's not on here that they would like to make sure the college is addressed?
Once again, there's only that, on the bridge part, just to ask the question as to whether they're considering a shift of the work schedule, but other than that, no. That's a lot there. I think you're right. Or either Laura or Frog said it. The first one's going to take up a long time.
All right, now Nick, check marks.
Oh, now Brian? There's nothing like a 10A in there somewhere we missed? Okay, the motion I have is to move to approve the total expenditures in the amount of $641,945.03. And that consists of $364,620.68 for accounts payable and $277,324.35 for payroll for the period of November 20th, 2019 through December 10th of 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Well, thank you.
Kathleen?
We're going to do an abbreviated version of the town manager's report. So really briefly, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we will be having a conference call with the Vermont Traffic Committee about the speed limits on Route 116 and 125. The traffic study recommendation that came out of the East Middlebury counts was to keep the traffic speed limits the same. So we'll be hearing more about that tomorrow. We're going to meet in my office and we will be getting the findings of the engineering study tomorrow before the meeting. The Battelle trustees are seeking permission from the probate court to transfer amount of $65,000 to the town as part of its commitment to the Land Conservation Trust Fund. Looking for to reappoint Jeff Olson to the ACETC board, but consistent with your policy, we're advertising that, and that will be coming up at your first meeting in January. The LCT annual dues notice was received. Our dues are going up from $11,200 to $11,700, about a 4% increase, and I'll incorporate that into our budget. The Lindale Mobile Home Parks Septic Planning Grant has been extended and increased from $30,000 to $60,000. ACT will be coming up with the additional local match required for that grant.
Did they apply for it? Or?
They requested an extension.
I didn't remember that coming.
Yeah, it was an administrative permission. Planning Commission reviewed the Purpose Energy Middlebury Resource Recovery Center proposal, and they had some minor concerns, but overall their letter to the Public Utilities Commission said that they've done the best they can do to comply with local zoning. Specifically, there was the digester tank exceed our height restrictions by approximately 5 feet. And the Middlebury Area Land Trust thanks Vermont Rail and ECI for helping deliver some gravel to the edge of Wright Park for use on the trail around Middlebury. Also pleased to report that the Wadebridge Selectboard has retained Brian's Lawn Care to maintain their sidewalks during the winter. Vermont Gas Systems, NEU, their subcontractor, helped our town crew repair a water main break in some nasty weather a couple of weeks ago. And we thank them for that.
Yeah.
I told, saw Victor the other day at the pancake breakfast, and I said that if we keep breaking that main and replacing it in 6-foot sections, we will no longer need to schedule a big project.
But if it starts popping every 6 sequentially,
Don't
we're
say
gonna have.
it. Don't say it.
It's an expensive way to replace it, though.
Yep. And we were just talking about how well we were doing in the budget.
I know, I was thinking the same thing. Questions of Kathleen? Okay, board member concerns. Lindsay?
No, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say how much I appreciate how thoughtful our citizens are and how they come to the table with really researched thoughts that add to the discussion, and it makes it harder and easier than to make decisions, but at least I feel, it's helpful to know what everybody's thinking, and that they take the time to come here, I think is really unique.
I agree. Nick?
So I concur with that because, as I said, I came thinking that I knew what I wanted to do, and then I get this from all that well research, so I agree. Nothing else, Brian.
Victor?
I would agree, Lindsay's.
I just have a couple of quick things. First, I want to thank the BMP and especially all the volunteers for putting on the Very Merry Middlebury, and remind people that the second midnight stroll is this Thursday, and want to remind people about the golden tickets hidden in the chocolate bars and that raffle. Also, just a great event on Saturday. It was great to be downtown and see people out, and so just thank you. Also, while I was downtown on Saturday, I ran into Jim, who was working, and they were doing some blasting in around the festivities, and I got a chance to chat with him. And then in the course of my walking around and shopping and searching for ornaments in the windows, had an opportunity to talk with Maria at Junebug, whose new store location is really at like ground zero. I mean, really. And she had some great things to say about Jim and his work and communication, and I just wanted to thank Jim again and just thank V-Trans for providing us Jim. And I think we should be really thankful as a board and as a community that we have that support. And he is actually in downtown working with these guys on a Saturday when it's 12 degrees out, and we're just extremely lucky. I also was coming back through town later in the afternoon on Saturday and got stopped in traffic right before the bridge, and went, what's going on? And they blasted right while I was sitting on downtown, so that was pretty cool. Oh, and just a quick reminder, I know there was minutes where the Creek Road Task Force, just to give you a quick update, is planning to meet on January 3rd at 8 a.m. and we're hoping, if we can, to come to some consensus on our most recent alternative, to present it to the infrastructure at their January meeting, and then to present it to the select board in some meeting in January. And I know I've got to get with Kathleen on what the budget schedule is for January and where it sort of fits. And hopefully we have success on the 3rd. So that's just a quick update on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Rod?
Happy holidays.
Laura?
Speaking of holidays, since Thanksgiving, we've had so much. And I'm just impressed with how culturally rich Middlebury is. We've had so much beautiful music, both from our students, like amazing concerts, middle school, high school, community choir, you name it. It's just been phenomenal that, people are really artistically expressed here, that we live in a place that's so rich that way. I never take that for granted. And also that Saturday, congruent with the
Blasting?
very blasting and very Middlebury. We had a lot of important other socially justice-related vigils or events. So we had a homelessness vigil that night that was very well attended. Again, just to raise consciousness of how difficult that issue is and how the community is really rallying to support that. In this case, the John Graham Shelter. So it was impressive to see that. And the Mexican consulate visit occurred this weekend too, and they processed over 150 documents that day. And it was just a wonderful event where Open Door Clinic comes and provides health checks. Winter clothing is provided by a lot of the faith groups, you know, and it's just a wonderful intersection of our community and our Mexican families that are here with us. So I just wanted to mention that Middlebury is really, you know, a very special shire town in holding all of that. Oh, and finally,
You thought she was done?
I did mention this. I just wanted to let you know that I am not going to run for re-election this March. I would like to rotate out of service and give others an opportunity to rotate in. And this is your time to really step in. So I'm hopeful that anyone who's watching or those that will hear about this will consider running for select board. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a great time to come in because we're in the midst of the downtown construction project. I came in 2014 at the convergence of all the conversation we were having about this building, you know, like what to do with our town office and gym and then the downtown construction project. So it's been a really robust time to be on select board, and I've been honored to be on select board, and I will continue on committees, and I hope that people who are on our committees might consider coming up to select board, you know, or others will consider coming on to those committees. We're really served well by our town committees and our select board, and I've loved serving with you, and of course I'm going to finish this out with you now that we're in the peak of budget setting season. So come on out to select board, you know, like keep coming and provide that that robust research and discussion that really helps us come to better decisions.
And we'll miss your presence on board with us.
Laura, we'll have a chance to thank you at we have one more town meeting, so we can probably thank you there. We have we got a couple of issues, both personnel and legal matters to discuss in executive session, so can you take us into that, Heather?
Yep. I'm just falling asleep here. My computer was falling asleep.
Geez, I thought we were going to be here till 10, but plowed through.
If someone else has it, go ahead.
In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of a personnel and legal matter and contracts would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its litigation strategy if it discusses the personnel and legal matter and contracts in public.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss the personnel and legal matter and contracts under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So at 9:14, we're going into executive session.